Have you considered using virtual assistants in your business but just weren't sure where to start or how it even works? I'm Adam Hooley and welcome to part 2 of my 7-part series on implementing virtual assistants into your business. So with part 2, we're going to walk through building and growing your offshore team. So we're going to look at the logistics of the offshore team and how to pull those logistics together to build out your offshore team. So let's look at this particular slide here about how you get started. So what we're saying is when you engage an offshore team, you should be engaging in a very pragmatic manner, which means it should be a decision that you plan and implement in advance. So if you just look at the slide I'm sharing here at the moment, on the left-hand side, you'll see I've got a grey box that says not this. And this is often how people initially engage virtual assistants. And this is not deliberate, it's just a reactive way of attacking things in their business when they become overworked. So they tend to find they outsource multiple people. So they might outsource somebody in India and somebody in the Philippines or even somebody in their own country to do particular tasks. And then what they're finding is that they end up with multiple virtual assistants in multiple locations looking for them. And that's very difficult to manage. And not only do you find it's difficult to manage, it becomes a very ineffective way of doing work. And while it may seem cheap up front, you end up with a resource that becomes expensive and very hard to manage. So what you also find is that each of those team members may have an unbalanced workload. So you've got maybe the person in India is working really hard and the person in the Philippines is not doing anything at all. And again, having to manage staff members that geographically dispersed becomes very, very difficult and very time consuming for yourself. So what you find is that if you do it in a very reactive manner, there gets to a point in time where you actually lose the efficiency of outsourcing because you're now sinking time into managing multiple people in isolated tasks. So what we tend to do is we say to engage a VA, you need to be more pragmatic. So on the right-hand side, we've gone through, okay, this is what works. We've been doing virtual outsourcing for many years, so we know what works and what doesn't. So some of the points I've put here for you is plan your team and understand their needs. So go through and find all your repetitive tasks and build them out and find out where you need better support, I guess I should say, and find out where those costly revenue leaks are or expenses and things like that. So also look at your growth expectations and how you're going to plan on building your VAs into your team as the future goes and how they're going to leverage growth for you and your team. So building a long-term strategy, use these facts to do that and build it out. Start with low risk and low time sensitive items and low value items and push those into your virtual assistants and start building out a framework from there. And then as you get used to the frameworks and as you get used to the procedures and as you get used to managing virtual assistants, you can then start beefing up their responsibilities and giving them definitely more of those. So what I've done here is giving you a timeline just so you can kind of get a bit of an idea on how you can implement different things into your business. So this is specific to property management, this particular example, is that what we're saying is we can start with low cost and low risk items. And you'll see here on the left at point 1, we've got rent arrears. So rent arrears is one of the most common things to start outsourcing because it is actually very easy. And it's a task where they can just send off reminders. And we even have VAs making calls to tenants, just friendly reminders, nothing formal, but friendly reminders to pay their rent. Then you'll see lease renewals is the second one. You can start building up into doing lease renewals. And again, another easy task. And that you can build out the responsibilities in these tasks. So what we're saying with lease renewals, for example, when you start implementing a VA, is you might do the CMA, you might go to the owner and get the lease renewal instructions, and then you might pass it to the VA and they will type up the lease for the tenant, or they may do the vacate pack if the owner's not interested in renewing the lease. But you can build those out, and I have seen VAs that are doing this full spectrum. They're actually doing the market appraisal, they're contacting the owners on the property manager's behalf, and then doing up the leases. So you can, as you get better at this and process this up and give your VAs more responsibility, they can take on a lot heavier workloads. And that's the difference with this next generation VAs that we employ through Hooley Virtual, is these people are all graduates and they can do high level tasks. So we don't need to worry about saying, well, okay, we're just doing VA for low-level back-end tasks. They can actually do a lot of heavy lifting for you once you've ironed out your processes and you have some momentum. So you see here, 3, you've got repairs and maintenance, 4, routine inspections, 5 is leasing management, 6 is marketing and entry notices, and then 7 is QA reporting. So there's an administration role that you can put in place here about pulling a lot of this reporting together for the office, because We all do lots of reporting each month, and that's very time consuming. So just to give you a bit of an idea on how you can roll out tasks into a VA as you employ them. So I just wanted to give you an example on here. This may look a little bit confusing. We won't hang too long on this slide, but it's basically saying, if you're just doing rent arrears, then one team member for every 1,000 properties. If you wanted to introduce lease renewals as well, and then repairs and maintenance, you can see the amount of team members for every single task that you give them as it starts to build out. And I've given you an example of these tasks underneath. But what you can go into is find this slide is a little bit more interesting and a little bit easier to do. So if you've got 500 properties, you probably need 3 offshore team members to implement all those things that we discussed in the previous slide. If you've got 1,000 properties, then you want 5 offshore team members to deal with all those particular tasks in those slides. Now, bearing in mind that that's not leaving a lot of tasks left for your property managers, which means your property managers can manage far more properties, they can build better relationships with your owners, and anything else that's operating customer facing. And again, you can see as you're getting up into 2,000, 4,000 properties, we start introducing team leaders at about 4 or 5. We're looking at introducing team leaders, and that takes a lot more weight off you again. They become a self-sufficient team, and then you're finding that there's minimal effort by you onshore to manage your offshore team. Okay, that's the end of part 2 in understanding next generation virtual assistants and implementing them into your business. I'm Adam Hooley. Don't forget to follow my YouTube channel or subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can get the rest of the parts in this series. Talk again soon.